And he based it off a book that both him and I have read now called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which has been a staple in my life for the past couple of months. So if you haven't read that book, or if you've never heard of it, it's by a pastor by the name of John Mark Comer. He is the former pastor, or one of the former pastors of Ridgetown Church in Portland, Oregon. I highly recommend it, especially if you're a person that wakes up, burns the candle at both ends all day, gets a couple hours of sleep at night, and then wakes up the next day and does it again. I highly, highly recommend it. But anyways, let's move on. So this week, like I said, we're in John chapter 15, and on Tuesday, I was sitting there in the doctor's office. I was in the waiting area, and I already had kind of the idea of where I was going for this message. But I remember that a couple of friends and I who had dinner a couple of weeks ago had talked about this new AI. It's not really new these days anymore, but it's called ChatGPT. Has anybody ever heard of it? Some people are like, yes, I heard of it. If you haven't heard of it, it's an artificial intelligence that creates content. And so I just sat there, I had a few moments, and I said, hey, what would a 20-minute sermon for a non-denominational church look like based on John chapter 15 in bullet points? 30 seconds later, a message based on John chapter 15 for a non-denominational church in bullet points appeared on my phone. And I immediately called my dad, who's a pastor, and said, Dad, your late night sermon writing times on Saturday evenings when you have no idea what you're going to preach on, those times just got a lot easier, right? And he laughed and said, something, something, Skynet, something, something, Terminator. But anyways, so I just thought that was a fun little way to start this. I'm not using this message. It is actually a pretty good, like I read through it, was like, this is pretty good. It's a little bit more overview-y today, but it still was, I was like, man, I'm actually pretty impressed with how, like, even though surface levelly, how it got a lot of things right. So if you ever are like, man, I just really want to hear a message on this, you can just read one. Go check it out. Just kidding. Anyways, so let's move on. So John chapter 15, in this part of John, this part of the gospel, Jesus has already entered Jerusalem for the Holy Week. So he entered in on a Sunday. We call that these days, we call that Palm Sunday. It's about a week. It is a week before Easter. So at this point, John entered into Jerusalem. And we're probably looking at like somewhere between Monday and Wednesday when he's doing this teaching. So he's giving kind of this last big speech to his disciples before his arrest and his crucifixion. So today, even though we're looking at the same passage we looked at last week, we're going to look at it in a little bit different of a light and talk about something that most of us seek or pursue a lot in our lives, and that's comfort. So we're going to start off looking at John 15, 1 through 6. So if you've got your Bibles, go ahead and flip that way. I already had mine bookmarked, so I'll wait for a second, right? I always hate that when you're in it, sitting there and somebody's like, if you want to flip to John 15, and then people like, and then they're like, and here we go, right? That's the worst thing of all time. All right, we there? It'll also be on the screen. It already is behind me. It says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide with me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me, and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers. And the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. So, that in this moment sounds a little core at the end, right? Burned and gathered. What's going on is Jesus is sitting with his disciples, and he's saying that I'm the true vine. For those that don't know vine anatomy, is there anybody that's like super well versed in vine anatomy today? No, me either. I do a lot of research on this week, so please roll with me, right? So if you're not well versed in vine anatomy, I've got a picture of a vine right there, and we're going to talk through it, okay? So let me explain the importance of the statement of Jesus saying that he is the true vine. A grapevine is like most plants in that it has like an above ground part and a below ground part, meaning it's got roots that hold it in, and it has where the fruit grows out on top. Now, in the anatomy of a vine, there's things you would see in most plants like roots, a trunk, a head, and the branches that bear fruit themselves, kind of like you would think of a tree in a way, but obviously it does not grow as tall as a tree. I think, yeah. So, in order, just like every plant, in order for a vine to grow, it takes up nutrients through the roots and the suckers, is what they're called, and it gives out nutrients through the trunk, the head, the vine itself into the branches where the grapes are formed. So in order for the branches to grow the fruit, it has to be connected to the head of the vine, which is connected to the trunk, which is connected to the roots that hold the main source of the vine in place. If you were to go to a vineyard and cut off a branch of a vine and take it home and put it on your kitchen table, it's not going to magically start growing fruit. It's not going to magically start doing what it would do if it was already and still attached to the vine. It's just going to sit there. It's just going to wither, and eventually it'll become very, very fragile. And then as you pick it up, it'll fall apart. The branch is not going to just magically come to life. So when Jesus says that he's the true vine, he often spoke in parables and in metaphors. He's not just some crazy dude who's like, I'm a plant, right? This is not one of those moments. But he is saying that he alone is the true source of substance and life. That detached from him, you don't have that. That he will provide, he will sustain, he is sufficient in all things, even when things don't feel like they're going right. The vine doesn't get ripped up easily in a storm because it has roots. And so therefore the branches don't get ripped up easily because they are attached to the vine. Is everybody with me? So Jesus' statement here is that he alone is the source of life and substance. Have you ever had a time in your life where you felt like God had let go of you? Or a time in your life where it feels like one thing is hitting you right after another, and you're starting to wonder and question, where is God in these moments? Know that he has not let go of you and that he is the true vine. When I was 26, we had just had our oldest daughter. She was maybe a couple months old. And my boss comes to us. I worked for a bank here in town. My boss comes to us in a team meeting, and he goes, hey, they're going to close our branch. We're too close to other branches. But everyone in here is going to be offered a place to go from here. And so the next manager up comes by a couple months later and says, hey, we're going to offer you a spot as a floater. And that was not anything that I ever wanted to be. It's hard to build relationships in that position. It's hard to build yourself up in that position. So I kind of said, thank you, but no thank you. I'll find something else. So we sat down, my wife and I did. And as amazing and beautiful that she is, she goes, hey, why don't you just stay home for a couple months and stay with our daughter? We made enough money at the time from her job that we could sustain, right? And I was like, yeah, sounds good. Not a week later, after my branch closed and I was out of a job, we get a phone call. It's Martin Luther King Day 2017. We get a phone call from my wife's mom and says, hey, we need you guys in Owensboro because her grandfather had gone to the hospital. So we get in the car. We're and we get about halfway there. And all the lights come on the car, all the bells, the whistles, all the stuff that's like, hey, something's wrong, you need to pull over. So we pull off in Lewisport. We grab a can of oil. If you guys are like car people, that's not me. I have no idea anything underneath the hood of a car. Zero clue. If that's you, great. I wish you had been there on Martin Luther King Day 2017, because here I am just pouring oil into what I know is the oil place where you put oil in. I have no clue what I'm doing here. But we get to Owensboro. We take our car to a mechanic, and they call us back and say, hey, you would need a total engine replacement, and it's going to cost more than the car is worth. So immediately, 1 week later, we're sitting in a place where we can't afford to fix our car, and we can't really afford to get a new car, but that's what we end up having to do anyway. So now, even though we made the money that we needed and we thought things were sufficient, just a few days prior, we're now in a place where we can't afford to live like this. The money coming in won't match the money going out. So we have to start looking for a job for me more quickly than we expected. And I went from rejection to rejection to rejection to crazy job that's not really a job, it was more like a multi-level marketing scheme, to another rejection, to finally I land in a bank. Another bank, a different bank than I worked. A bank that has like one of the top rated employee ratings in the city. And if you know banks in the city, you probably know which one I'm talking about. But that wasn't where I was supposed to be. That wasn't the calling I had on my life, and that wasn't the place that I was really placed in by Jesus. It was just a place where I could make money, support my family, and try to find somewhere else. And it had nothing to do with the place that I worked, but I, every day, would walk in more and more just unable to wake myself up to go to work. More and more unable just to get out of bed. And so after a few months, they could very quickly notice that I wasn't what they wanted as an employee. And I knew in my own heart that I was in the biggest slump of depression I've ever had. And we kind of just agreed to part ways. And so the next couple weeks, we're floundering financially. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do. How are we going to make it to make sure we can pay rent this month? We don't want to ask so-and-so for any more money. We've already had to ask them for this much, right? And the whole time, I'm wondering, God, what are we doing? Where are you at? Why are we floundering here? What did we do wrong? And all in all, it wasn't that he ever walked away from us. It was that we slowly and not realizing we're walking farther and farther away from him. But yet he still hadn't let go of us. And I could say now, 6 years later, are in a much, much better place. Well, I mean, we're still teachers. We're not like rolling in any money or anything like that, right? Right? Everybody knows that's the old joke right there. But we're not at each other's throats because we're floundering. And we don't have a 4-month-old baby that we have to figure out how are we going to live and breathe and eat and feed. God never let go of us through the entire situation. So please know, if you're in that place today where you don't know that you're going to be able to get out of bed tomorrow to go to work, he hasn't let go of you, and he's still the true vine that provides sustenance. He provides substance. He provides all things you need in life. So just after the first verse, Jesus goes on to say that while he is the true source of life, his Father, which is our Father, which is God the Father, the head of the Trinity, takes away every branch that does not bear fruit, and he prunes the fruit-bearing branches as well. Hey, Caleb, I'm going to switch this 6 over here. Sorry, guys, I can just hear this going in and out left and right. Is that better? Cool. Jesus doesn't mince words here. He says, let me read that again, that the Father is the vine dresser, and the vine dresser either takes away the branches that don't bear fruit, or he prunes the ones that do. And Jesus doesn't mince words. He says that his Father will take away branches that don't bear fruit. So the question becomes, why would the Father take away those branches? Because we've already said we're the branches. People are the branches in this metaphor. What does that look like? Well, in this metaphor, the vine dresser cuts off the branches that are not bearing fruit because even though those branches are physically still attached to the vine, they are not receiving life from the vine. They might look like they're attached to the vine. They might seem like they should be getting more and more from the vine, but they're not taking in the life-giving aspects of the vine. And because they aren't taking those in, they have to be taken away, or else the whole vine suffers and becomes infected with whatever is infecting that branch. So please understand that this is the picture of a person who might say, I know Jesus, or pretend that they have a relationship with Jesus, but it's noticeable that they're lacking fruit. And the Father knows which branches are truly bearing fruit, just as the Father knows our hearts and our minds and our actions. And he knows who's actually abiding in Jesus because he knows us. But here's the part of the problem. When I just said that, and I do this too, so I'm not just blaming you guys, I'm blaming myself as well. As I'm describing the metaphor of what a branch that's not bearing fruit looks like, it looks like a person who's just pretending to be a Christian versus being a Christian, whatever that looks like, right? You might have thought of somebody in your head. Did anybody think of somebody? You don't have to tell me. Don't confess that right now. You might have thought of somebody in your head. But I want to be quick to say that in this metaphor and in actual life, whether we're going to stick in the metaphor of the vine dresser and the vines or people, the branches, it's not the branch's job to cut off other branches. Does everybody see that? It didn't say the branches will come together, they'll get the elder branches, they'll come together, they'll talk about this branch over here that's not really bearing fruit, and then they're going to go over to that branch and tell it, hey, you've got to leave our vine here because you're not growing fruit. That's not a thing it says in this passage. It says the vine dresser will take care of that. So in your mind, if you thought, oh God, Kelly at work is just the worst, and if your name's Kelly, I'm sorry, I'm not, you're just a fictional person. If there's somebody in here named Kelly, I'm sorry, I'm just using your name. Kelly at work is the worst. She pretends on Facebook all the time that she's a Christian. She'll walk around, she'll judge people. She'll be like, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do that. And all this time, but you know what Kelly does on Friday nights. So you're like, wait a second, Kelly, what are you doing? See, that's the thing. It's not our job to go and tell Kelly's to get out. It's not our job to go and tell Kelly's off. Like I said, if your name is Kelly, I'm just using you as a metaphor. I don't even know why Kelly. They just popped in my brain. Sorry, Kelly. But it's not our job to go and tell the other branches that they're doing things wrong. That's the job of the vine dresser, the job of the Father. So if you know someone in your life that this sounds just like, don't be quick to judge them, but instead pray for them. Pray they find a relationship with Jesus, a true one, that their life goes from being superficial to real, from self-centered and one-sided and diseased to healed and restored. And if we take a look inward, we see that in our own life, we also need to pray for that in ourselves too, right? We've all got places, and that's where we're getting ready to go. We've all got places that need to be cut out of our lives. We've all got them. Whether they are openly broadcast to the world, or they are the deepest things that we have in our lives. So luckily in the real world, outside of this vineyard analogy, if you're Kelly, not really Kelly, but if you're this fictional Kelly in this metaphor that I'm using, if you're the person who is a dead branch, there's still time. There's still time to take in that life-giving substance of Jesus. There's still time to take in that word of Jesus. When I say life-giving substance, I want to make sure I'm very clear here. The word of Jesus, the relationship and the time with Jesus, the adoration, the confession, the thanksgiving, and the supplication that Robert talked about last week. There's still time. You're not too far gone. You're not too fruitless in your life right now that he won't accept you. Next, it says that the Father prunes those that are bearing fruit so that they'll bear even more fruit. So a vine dresser, getting back to that research I did this week, a vine dresser prunes grapevines for 3 reasons. The first one is to keep the grapevine productive and free from disease. To keep the things that might kill the branch out, he prunes it. The second reason is to encourage growth where you want it for the vines, because that makes it easier to manage. So if the vine is growing in the wrong direction, you prune it and try to lead it the other direction. And then the third reason, because it ensures quality fruit production by removing excess growth and concentrating all of the life-giving energy to the parts that are bearing fruit. So when you prune a grapevine, it helps to ensure fruit production and keeps the branch healthy from disease and things that cause it to wither and die. This is the heart of what I want us to talk about today, right here. Because even the healthy branches, the ones that are already bearing fruit, the ones that are showing love and joy and peace and patience and kindness, generosity and goodness, faithfulness, self-control, even those branches that are healthy, they still get cut back. They aren't allowed to just grow and grow and grow, because the longer a branch becomes, the farther the end of the branch gets from the vine. And eventually, the longer it gets, the more it has to start putting the nutrients into growing out that one branch rather than focusing on building the fruit. It becomes self-centered. It goes into survival mode. If I want to keep growing, if I want to start looking better, if I want to have the better job, if I want to have better finances, if I want to have a better social status, if I want to look like I'm doing all the right things, I've got to keep growing, and I'm going to keep, thank you for all these blessings that you've given me. I'm going to keep using them for my own selfish reasons. Instead, it has to be cut back in order for it to keep bearing fruit. And that's uncomfortable. Anybody in here love comfort? Who likes to have a comfortable day? Anybody? Nobody? Thank you, Otto. I appreciate that. I love comfort. That's like my favorite thing of all time, right? When I look at vacations, you might be the person that's like, I'm going to go vacation in the mountains, and I'm going to climb mountains, and I'm going to go and I'm going to hike through all these places, and I'm going to go whitewater rafting. No, my vacation is me sitting on a beach with nothing but a Dr. Pepper and time, right? That's it. That's my vacation. That's what I enjoy doing. That's when I think of leisure, that's it. I ain't climbing mountains, right? Like, this is it. I'm sitting on a beach. But I just want to say, I love comfort. At the end of a long day, I just want to come home and watch TV, sit on my couch, not worry about anything, spend some time scrolling through the various social medias, finding new things to do, right? And the problem is, when I do that day after day after day, I find that, I don't actually do anything I'm called to do by Jesus. And honestly, I haven't done anything at all. I've just kind of worked and sat. And then worked and then sat. And nothing to show for it. So if that's you today, just know that I'm there with you. And this is a battle. And this is why I said the book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, is one that I consider a staple in my life, because I have to continuously go back and read through it, because that's what it fights against, are those times in our life where we just sit and then work and then just sit. So, but the truth is, the Father is going to prune our lives. Even if things are going amazingly well, the Father's going to prune our lives. And that's not comfortable. So you might go to church. You might be a part of or lead or run a Discovery Bible study or any Bible study. You might listen to worship music in your car or a message podcast or whatever that looks like for you, whenever you're in the mood for it. You might have all these things that you're like, this is the checklist, I'm doing it all, ha 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 ha, right? You're finding some checklist of things that you've got to do as a follower, as a disciple of Jesus, and you're like, I'm going to knock every one of these off every single day. That's great. You're still going to have pruning and moments in your life that need to be taken away to grow more and more fruit. So, the question becomes, today, what is it that God's calling you to cut out of your life? Because I'm a firm believer there's two ways this works. One, you cut it out when you know you should, or two, he'll cut it out for you. Right? So what's God calling you to cut out of your life to get rid of? Or what has he already started cutting out? Maybe for you, it's an addiction. Maybe for you, it's a friend that gets into trouble. Because here's the thing. I think a lot of disciples believe, I can change them. I can do everything I need to do, and I'm going to make sure that they become a disciple just like me. Whew, that doesn't always work. That doesn't always work. So maybe it's a friend that's always getting into trouble. Maybe it's the fact that we can be bad stewards of the things that God has blessed us with. Maybe it's breaking promises to people, your family, your friends, your kids, your parents, your brothers, your sisters. Maybe it's an unhealthy relationship between you and a parent, a sibling, a spouse, a significant other. Maybe he's cutting out of your life porn and lustful thoughts. Whatever it is, like I said, there's two ways about it. You either cut it out yourself, or he's going to cut it out for you. And like I said, you might think you're good because you follow that checklist and you most days get some of the things checked off. But the Father's going to come along and prune the things still that aren't helping you bear fruit. So I want us to take a moment and think about, what are those things in my life that I need to cut out, or that I know the Father's telling me to cut out? Just take a moment. Breathe into that for a second. For me, it's 1,000% my cell phone usage. 1,000%, and I know it. And it's a battle for me every day. I'm the kind of, like I said earlier, I like to come home, sit on the couch, turn on TV, and I just flip through my phone. Some days I have the peace of mind to know I need to go put the phone in the other room. Some days I don't. But that's one of those things where I just scroll needlessly through Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. And all that really does for me, like, I'm not the kind of person who, I'm not looking for like ministry moments necessarily on these things. I'm looking through and going, man, so-and-so just bought this sweet car. How much would it cost for us to get this? We could eat ramen for a month, right? Man, so-and-so just built a new deck. That looks really good. We should put that on the back of our house. We could eat ramen for a couple months, right? That's my social media experience, right? Just all the jealousy and the self-centeredness. Moments and seasons of pruning are not fun, and they're not comfortable. Maybe you've had them yourself. Maybe you haven't. Maybe it was something you never even realized got pruned out of your life until after it did. I think a lot back to like my college days where we were partying every weekend, or when I was on the road playing bass with a band and we were partying every weekend. And there are days where I go, man, I miss some of those guys, or I miss some of those friends. And I didn't even realize that we were drifting apart, or in this metaphor, they were being cut and pruned out of my life until way, way later, when we hadn't seen each other for years and years and years. Sometimes, and even in those times it was uncomfortable, right? Like I still was sitting there going, man, I miss these friends. Or when I would talk to them, it'd be kind of awkward because we hadn't really reached out and talked to each other. Like when you run into like an ex in the grocery store and you're just like, hey, right? That's what it was like. Pruning is going to get uncomfortable. Awkward conversations are going to happen during the pruning parts of your life. Apologies are going to take place during the pruning parts of your life. Confessions are going to happen. People that you thought were your ride or dies are going to end up just not being there anymore. Secrets are either going to get pruned or they're going to come to light in these times. Pruning is uncomfortable by every worldly standard. I want to make sure you hear that worldly part. By every worldly standard, pruning is uncomfortable because God is removing the things that are infected in your life, in your spiritual life, because we've put these things in these spaces that are important to us, but honestly, they're what's killing our spiritual selves. So it is uncomfortable. But inherently, being a disciple of Jesus is uncomfortable anyway. So if you came in today and you're like, man, being a disciple of Jesus is the most comfortable thing in the world, it's not. I'm sorry to burst your bubble. It's not. In John chapter 15, still verse 18, it says this: if the world hates you, know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own, but you're not. Because I have chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Jesus said this to his disciples then, it applies to us now. And this is a very uncomfortable statement for me. Very uncomfortable. I like to be liked. I like to be loved. I can hate one person one moment, but then when I see them, I'm like, hey, what's up, Kelly? What's up? Yeah, Kelly. Right? Once again, Kelly's, I'm sorry if your name is Kelly. But anyways, right? And I can turn it around and be like, man, because I at least want to be indifferent towards other people, right? I want them to at least look at me with some sense of likability or some sense of indifference. Like, I don't want to be hated. I don't want to be disliked by anybody. But that's what Jesus says is going to happen. Because the world hates Jesus, they're going to hate his followers. And that creates discomfort all the way around. But that doesn't mean we get to go into hiding or we get to say, we're going to walk around and not tell people that we are Christians or we're disciples of Jesus. That's not what this is saying. In fact, Jesus does go on to say just a little bit later in this passage that the disciples and we are going to bear witness to others about Jesus because we've been with him. So in light of the fact that we're going to get rejected, in light of the fact that we're to get looked down on or looked at as holier than thou, we're still going to have to bear witness to who Jesus is to the people in our lives. And that's uncomfortable. And if we're not doing that, we've missed the mark. Because, y'all, I'm going to be honest. People at my job know what I'm about. They know I'm a worship leader here. Some of them have watched the stuff that we do online. They know, most of them know where our church is because we one time went to Red Top Hot Dogs and I said, you all can park at the church. It's right there. That's where I go. But that doesn't mean I'm walking around talking about Jesus every day. That doesn't mean I'm walking around acting like I should as a follower of Jesus every day. Right? Just because someone knows that you're a follower doesn't mean that you're still acting as a follower to them. Knowing is only half the battle, right? Take that, G.I. Joe. All right. So comfort as apprentices of Jesus doesn't come from social media. It doesn't come from food. It doesn't come from alcohol. It doesn't come from drugs. It doesn't come from porn. It doesn't come from lustful thoughts. It doesn't come from the addictions we might have or the people that we're with. It doesn't come from any particular financial number that we're eventually going to hit or not hit. Comfort doesn't come from those things when we are apprentices and followers of Jesus. They come as we bear fruit. They come as we bear joy in our lives. They come as we bear love in our lives, and peace and patience and kindness and goodness or generosity and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control. They come in the form of those fruits of the Spirit that we hear about. That's where comfort comes from. The number of people and the number of, I've been reading a book that's all about anxiety, and it particularly takes the stats of the number of people that deal with anxiety pre-COVID to post-COVID. And the numbers have skyrocketed. I'm sure you're aware. In this room, the odds are there's probably at least 6 people, give or take. I'm just kind of doing some quick math here, that are on medication for anxiety. I've been one of them. Anxiety has skyrocketed in our nation, in our world. And the thing is, a lot of it comes from the fact that we're trying to find comfort in everything. I remember when I started here. I'm out of the notes now. I'm not even in the message anymore. When I started here, my very first Sunday was the shutdown. 2020, March, what was that, like 15th, 2020 was my first Sunday. And I remember looking at Robert, and we were talking about, we're still learning each other, trying to get on the same page, figuring each other out. And I was like, man, it's crazy how much content is being created right now. If you're a content creator in the room, you know what I'm talking about. TikTok took off in March, April 2020, because people were able to create content left and right and just put it out there. Every other social media followed their example and created. If you're in Facebook, it's Reels, and Instagram, it's Reels. YouTube, it's Shorts, so that we create more and more and more content on a quicker basis. And because of that, people started trying to find comfort in content. And the anxiety of our world skyrocketed. And I'm not here to say if you're a content creator or if you live that life that there's something inherently wrong with that either. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying when we try to find comfort and joy out of things that don't inherently bring it, it's going to fall short. And we're gonna see the darkest parts of life skyrocket in our life. So Jesus commands, so what are we to do with this? Right? When the world's going to hate us, we're going to get pruned. This sounds terrible. We're all going to go home today and just be like, I don't know about all this, man. This guy was a little too much today. Well, so what does this look like in our lives? This looks like chasing after Jesus in a much deeper way. This looks like going after, not just to mark things off a checklist, but to actually enjoy spending time in life with Jesus, with our Savior and our Creator. This looks like reading Scripture not because He tells us to, but because we want to. This looks like singing songs of adoration to Him, not because He tells us to, but because we want to. It looks a lot more like wanting to see Jesus than being told to see Jesus. And what does that mean for us and the people that we're around? And the people that are going to hate us, right? Let's talk through this. Let's talk about what we're supposed to do with these Kellys. The 3 things that we're supposed to do, it'll appear on the screen behind me, I believe. The first one is we should pray for them. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 43, it says, "You've heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy." It goes on to say, "But I tell you that you should love your enemy and pray for those that persecute you." So if there's somebody that rejects you or somebody that hates you because you are a follower of Jesus, pray for that person. Don't turn and punch them out as much as you might want to, right? Pray for that person. The second thing that we should do for those that hate us is check to see if there's anything in our own eye first. A lot of times they say that the biggest cause of atheism in the world today is that they see Christians that acknowledge Jesus with their lips, but then go and live a life that has nothing to do with Jesus or look like Jesus. And that's so hard because, I get that. And I agree with them. But it says in Matthew 7, 3-5, "Why do you see the speck that is in your own brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when there is a log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly take the speck out of your brother's eye. It is not the branch's job to cut out other branches." The third thing that we can do is to forgive. Is to forgive them. Because we have this beautiful, beautiful sight of Jesus on the cross. And when I say beautiful, I don't mean beautiful as in it looks pretty or to, it was a beautiful sight to see someone who loves you die. That's not what I'm saying. But we have this beautiful example that Jesus was. Because he sat on the cross, and it says in Luke chapter 23, verse 34, he says, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they've done." Forgive those people in your life that have hated you or that have rejected you because of Jesus, because that's exactly what he did for you. So as John comes back up, know that Jesus' commands are to love God with everything, with our heart, our soul, our mind, our strength. And the second is like it, to love our neighbor as ourselves. These commands didn't change when Jesus mentions that the world's going to hate you. He didn't go, "Hey guys, so you remember what I said earlier about loving the world? Well, I only meant the people that love you." He didn't change his mind. It still stayed the same. Love the people of this world, even if they hate you. Love them. He didn't say, "Well, do the best you can as long as it doesn't affect your social status." He didn't just say, "Love them when it's easy." But he said, "Love them and love me." So even when you're hated, love them. Even when you're broken, love them. Even when it's the most uncomfortable thing, love them. Don't judge them. Don't cuss back at them. Don't kick them when they're down. Love them just as Jesus loved you. So during this next song, as John plays, the table is going to be open. Over here and over here, we have communion cups. And as you peel back the top layer, you'll find the cracker that represents the body of Christ that was broken for you. As you peel back the second layer, you'll find the juice that represents the blood of Christ that was shed for you. This was all done out of love. Every bit of it. The cross he took, the sin he bore, the debt he paid, all of it was done for you so that you can be redeemed. Next week, and I'm not trying to take us away from this moment, but next week, we're having baptisms. We already have 3 people who are signed up to come and be baptized. If you have recently received Jesus into your life, if you just recently learned who Jesus is and you want to talk through what baptism looks like or what its purpose is, or if you have just rededicated your life and you want to get baptized again, we believe that baptism is an outward expression of what's already happened on the inside, that Jesus has come into our lives. He's changed our lives. We've accepted that he's loved us and he died for us and he rose again. He's our Savior. So if that's you today and you're like, man, I just really, really want to be baptized next week, or I want to show my rededication through baptism again, we invite you to do that as well. So here during the end, when we're down here on the floor, on this side over here, and Joe and Kim, if you guys would come and pray over here, I would love it. And so if you have anything that you want to pray about this morning, we'd love to pray with you. We'd love to spend time with you. If you have any questions about baptism or communion or any of this at all, we'd love to do our best to answer them. We don't have all the answers either, right? But we know the one who does. So come and take and do so in remembrance of him. And if you have any prayer, we'd love to meet with you.